When I got out of the theater from seeing this movie, the one question that I couldn't help but continue to ask myself was, who does this franchise think it is exactly? What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review for I Know What You Did Last Summer. This is a legacy sequel to the original film of the same name that came out all the way back in the glorious year of 1997. That was a really big year for me because that's the year that I was brought into this glorious world. And the basic premise to this film is essentially the same as the one for that original movie. You have a group of young adults who, through their partying, drunken antics, and negligence, cause a car accident resulting in the death of a stranger, and instead of reporting it to the police and implicating themselves for the death of a stranger, they just hightail it out of there and wash their hands clean of it, only for a year later to start receiving mysterious letters that read, "I know what you did last summer," and from there on they begin to get hunted and stalked by a mysterious figure who wears a fisherman's slicker and has a hook for a weapon. Now, to be honest, this has never been a story or a franchise that I think warranted existing past the first movie, in my opinion. I do get a lot of 90s nostalgic campy fun out of that first film, but all of its sequels that followed, I felt like were just less interesting rehashes of the original, and so they just didn't connect with me in the same way. But there has been attempts to make this a bigger IP within the slasher genre. A couple of years ago, there was an Amazon Prime series titled I Know What You Did Last Summer, but I just couldn't be bothered to check it out. I couldn't drum up enough interest inside of myself to sit down and watch the however many episode season that got released, and I never really heard any good things about it, so I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything by not checking it out. So because I am just a casual enjoyer of the original and not a big fan of all of its sequels, this wasn't really one of my more anticipated movies of the year. Honestly, it's probably in my top 10 for least anticipated of this year because there's a multitude of reasons behind that. You know, legacy sequels in the horror genre are very hit and miss, more often miss than hit. And in terms of franchises that I want to see get a legacy sequel, I think that I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise would fall pretty low on that list. I don't think the killer is all that interesting. The fisherman doesn't really stand amongst the giants that are in the slasher genre. And I just don't know what more there is to do with this story that is not just recycling the same old formula that other movies within the franchise have done. However, even with my super low expectations, I really did try my best to go in with an open mind. And because I do love slashers so much, I am sometimes blinded by that love and am capable of either looking past or forgiving a certain amount of flaws that the movie may contain. It just needed to prove to me that it was a legacy sequel worth existing. And did they end up doing that? Was I left surprised, or did they just confirm the expectations that I had going in for it? Well, the answer is a little bit of both. I don't think that this was a dumpster fire of a movie. I think this was a solid enough attempt at a legacy sequel all these years later. I do think it's probably better than the output that we got in the previous sequels, but there are still a ton of issues that I have with this movie, and I will get into all of that with you guys right now. But first, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel as well for more movie reviews and content. I would love to have you guys here. Make sure to also get down in the comment section below and tell me all the thoughts you have for the I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise. I love to read anything you guys have to say. Now let's get into the review. Starting with the positives, and I think something that this movie actually improves upon from the ones that came before it is that I think this is the best iteration of the fisherman character that we have ever gotten. Of all the movies, this was the first time that while watching one, I could actually feel the threatening presence of the character. They're much more physically imposing. They feel way more violent and inescapable than they ever have before. And even though I've never been a big fan of the hook as a signature weapon, I've always thought it was a little goofy and a very impractical tool for a slasher to use. I do think they get more out of it in terms of the kills than any of the prior movies have. I still think they could have gone a little bit further with the gore and really earned that R rating, but there's solid enough. And just all around, I think they improved a lot of the flaws that I have felt this character has had within the franchise. And just on a pure slasher standpoint, I really enjoyed what they did for this character in this modern day take. Something that did surprise me about this movie is that I didn't end up absolutely hating all of the new characters. Now, they're not perfect. There are a lot of things that I do feel hold them back to a degree, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But overall, I do think there are some standouts here, specifically Madeline Klein as Danica and Tyreek Withers as Teddy. I think they did a great job kind of bringing that campiness from that original movie to this one, just adjusted to the modern day. And this was a rare moment where I actually wish we could have just not gotten the legacy characters at all. I don't think they were needed for this movie. This probably would have been better if it had just been a flat out remake or a standalone sequel, because I think you could have done some things to improve on the flaws that were kind of baked into these characters and drawn them out a little bit more to improve upon them. But the fact that I didn't hate all of them was honestly a win for me, because judging by trailers and casting and not really having any faith in these legacy sequels, I was surprised that I enjoyed any of them to the degree that I was able to. Transitioning to the negatives now, because I want to stick with these characters. The biggest issue with them is the dialogue in this movie is pretty horrendous at times, especially when it comes to trying to be quippy and funny. Now, though those two characters that I mentioned do have a lot of funny moments and it does work, it does miss a lot more than it hits. And a funny comparison I actually was feeling while I was watching this movie is that it felt very similar to the worst parts of MCU humor. And then when I got out of this movie and I was looking at the director and the writers, I saw that the director and co-writer for this movie also was a writer for Thor: Love and Thunder. And that was kind of like the light bulb moment, like, oh, well, that makes sense, because there were so many moments where they would cram a quick little quip or joke into a very serious and dramatic moment, and it would completely kill all tension and drastically shift the tone, and you would just be left rolling your eyes, especially with the type of dialogue that a lot of these characters are giving. They're giving a lot of Gen Z slang, and it's almost like they're doing this in hopes that 20 years from now, from this movie, people will watch this one and feel that campy nostalgia that we now feel for the 1997 movie. But watching the movie in present day, it just comes off honestly kind of cringe. I know that's an overused word, but there's really no other way I can describe how these characters talk in this movie other than that. You're probably wondering why at this point in the video I still have not specifically talked about the legacy characters, and that is just because unfortunately I did not like at all what this movie does with them. I do love all of them as performers. They are very beloved actors and actresses, so just seeing them all on the screen together again does bring a level of enjoyment, specifically with Jennifer Love Hewitt. We don't get to see a lot of her anymore, so just to see her on the big screen and being talked about again is awesome, but I just am not a fan of how they are utilized in this movie. There's a scene in this film specifically that I think honestly might be my least favorite singular moment in a film that I have seen all year. It is so tonally out of place. There's some technology involved that just looks absolutely awful and distracting. And even though I got a lot of love for the performer that is in this scene, it was not their best day at the office. I don't know if it was something to do with them or how they were being directed, but it was just an absolute no-go for me. And you can definitely tell that this scene only exists in this movie to grab at your feelings of nostalgia, because contextually it just doesn't make sense with any of the rest of the movie. The last thing I got here is I feel like they absolutely dropped the ball as it pertains to the identity of the fisherman. I typically with these movies try to turn my brain off because I hate figuring out who the killer is before I'm meant to, but they play their cards way too early in this film, and if you're trying even a little bit to play detective, you will pick the killer out of the crowd immediately. And when you know who the killer is and you think back to some of the moments in this movie, there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense as to why they would do the things that they do. And I know a lot of people are giving this movie a ton of credit for the bold directions they go, but you can't just be bold for the sake of being bold. You have to earn that. And I don't think this movie does anything to do it. When the mask comes off and the identities are revealed and the motivations are made known, I just don't buy any of it. So as shocking and bold as they go, and I do admire them for taking that risk and breaking the mold and changing the formula to a legacy sequel, they just completely completely skip all the necessary steps you got to take to get me to that moment, and it just falls flat on their face. And another thing is, I don't get why in these movies now, when the mask does come off, they just become cartoons. It happened in the last Scream movie when the identities were revealed. They just turn into freaking Looney Tunes and they completely change their personality. And I think it always comes off as just being really off-putting, and I don't enjoy it at all. And I can't buy how the character got to that point from where they were the entirety of the movie beforehand. So in the end, this is a legacy sequel that is by no means nearly as bad as I thought it possibly could be, but it fails to really do anything to impress me either that makes me want anything more from this franchise moving forward. And judging by the post-credit scene that this movie does have, we will be getting more, but I think as of right now, I will just continue to go into these movies with pretty low expectations until they do something to raise the bar for themselves in my eyes. And I'm not very hopeful that they're going to be able to do that, because there's a lot of stuff in this movie that makes it very clear to me that they think because they are a franchise that was born from a Kevin Williamson script as well, that they can just go the Scream route. But this is not a franchise that has ever had the legs, the staying power, the fan base, or the icon status that Scream has. So you can't just decide we're going to do that and get the same results. They try to do the Kevin Williamson meta humor thing in this. Jennifer Love Hewitt spouts a line about nostalgia being overrated, and you just can't do that. So much of this movie is holding your hand, trying to remind you of the past and the nostalgic feeling that you have for that original film, and just them pointing it out and trying to make fun of themselves for it doesn't work. This style and tone that they're now trying to take from Scream just feels very copycat, and that's why I start this video off with asking, who does this franchise think it is? Because it clearly does not have its own identity that is at least strong enough for them to stand on their own. They now have to copy the identity of a fellow slasher franchise that is far superior. So moving forward, I'm just not that interested in what I Know What You Did Last Summer has to offer if they're going to go down that road. I think that's just a really disappointing route to take, in my opinion. Well, guys, those are all of the thoughts I have for I Know What You Did Last Summer, though there are some bright spots to it. This was, for the most part, a typical mediocre legacy sequel in a what I already consider to be a mediocre slasher franchise. It offers enough surface level fun to warrant checking out once it is available on a streaming service. It's definitely a throw it on at home on a Friday night kind of movie that I think more casual audiences may get more fun out of it than I did. But if you've already decided to give this movie a shot, what did you think about it? Did you enjoy it more than I did, or are you more in the same camp as me in terms of it either being disappointed or being exactly what you thought it would be? I would love to know what you guys think about it down in the comments below. Make sure to also give the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well for more movie reviews and content. I would love to have you here, and I will see everybody in my next one. Peace.